Charles Taylor said that the modern self is the buffered self. It's the self that has learned over the centuries, the past 5 centuries, to put up all these barriers to experiencing the numinous. And the buffered self doesn't exist outside the West, outside the modern world. Well, people in the West now, they realize they need to be more porous to let in the world of spirit. But again, you can't have one without the other. Just today, Jonathan, here in Budapest, I had a long lunch with a friend, a fallen away Catholic, who started reading my book, and then really strange things began to happen to her. And she began to feel that there was a presence in her room, and the presence started pressing down on her chest. To make a long story short, it turns out she and her brother had gone to into a cemetery a couple of years ago, just to see family graves or whatever. Her dog started barking like crazy at nothing, and she and her brother both felt that there was some malign entity around, and they left quickly. Now, the brother's a practicing Catholic. She's fallen away. But she believes, she's not sure now, but she believes that something may have attached itself to her then. And she got really, really scared recently when reading my book and starting to think about the spiritual world. These things began to show themselves in her life. Now, she said to me when this first came out, she goes, I'm really scared. I'm really scared. I don't want to deal with this. And I said, well, if this is a real thing, you're going to have to deal with it. It's not going to go away because you don't want it there. I suggest you call your priest. Well, tonight, as you and I are speaking, she's having her apartment blessed by her priest. She started to go back to Mass, and I was giving her encouragement at lunch today. I said, I know you're frightened. These things are frightening, but they take their strength from our fear. You are a child of God. You belong to Christ. Go back to Mass, make a good confession, do these things, and they'll go away. But you can't avoid the fight by just choosing not to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really difficult still for some secular types to understand how this is possible. And I try to help people understand with smaller cases, like smaller cases that you deal with all the time, which is that, if let's say you're a child and your mother is angry with you, she doesn't touch you, right? She doesn't beat you. She's just really angry with you. Now that influence, it's a spiritual influence for all intents and purposes, will affect you. Like you can get sick, you can have trouble sleeping. All of these things can happen to you, and she's not going to touch you at all. It's an influence. It's a spiritual influence. Now, it's easier to understand, of course, when it's a person, but you can understand it as a general mood. For example, like in a state where there's a police state, like during COVID, you maybe you never see the police, maybe you never see the authorities, but there's something in the air that is oppressing you, and you can feel it. And so there are all kinds of cases of this, and some of them go beyond the way that secular people tend to think. But you can understand it through analogy with things that happen to us every day. It's just that people who are sensitive to these experiences will tell you that it's not just how can I say this, that it can be something like what you could call like a psychic residue, like something of something that happened in a space that has imprinted it in a subtle way. And that's, again, it's hard for people to understand, but that can actually affect you. And you know that because because if you walk into a room where something really bad has happened, sometimes you don't know what, you can kind of see. If it just happened not very long ago, you can feel odd. You can't tell, like your mind can't tell what it is that happened, but you still have this odd feeling. And that type of psychic imprint can continue on for a long time. But a lot of people I know, even people that watch me, will listen to you and be like, what is this? This is crazy.
Oh, it's so interesting, though, how, I've been living in this world as a Christian for a while because, Ross Douthat at the New York Times, a friend of mine, a faithful Catholic, he told me a few years ago, you've got to write your woo book, because he said, of all the friends of mine, you're the one to whom these things happen. And it really is true. I seem to be a weirdo magnet or a woo magnet, not only personally and things that have happened to me in life, but the kind of people who talk to me. And maybe I have a feeling that these things are much more common than we know, but people talk to me about it because they know I'm not going to tell them you're crazy, that didn't happen. I just want to hear it. Maybe they have imagined a particular thing, but in general, I'm like, no, that's real. That's happened to other people.
Yeah. And it's also, this is the difficulty about these types of events, is that the line between imagined and happened is not as clear as people might think, because if if you imagine that something happened to you, like you have, and you could say it's all in your mind, like it's still happening to you. That this is something that's difficult. Again, it's difficult because the problem with influence and the problem with the way in which things influence on us are not it's not like hitting a piece of wood with a bat. There's a kind of interpersonal relationship that sets itself up. And it's the same, for example, like if you, let's say, again, you take the story of your mother who's angry at the kids, let's say, and she keeps that, like she's angry for several days. And one of the child will engage with it and receive it and answer it and will become sick because of it. And the other will just be like, yeah, whatever, because it's not a one directional thing. And so if you have something that happens just in your mind, the idea that you could just say what's not happening, well, try to pretend that it's not happening for long enough and you will be in danger. And even if it is, even if it is psychological and just your mind, it's still happening to you.
Yeah, that's what I was telling my friend here in Hungary. I said, you could try to put it out of your mind, but that doesn't make the thing go away. I mean, if there were criminals prowling the street at night, you may never go out of your house at night, but they're still there. And if you can deal with them, if you can make them go away effectively, then you should do that. I was having this conversation earlier this week. I was in Bratislava in Slovakia, sitting around a table having breakfast with some Catholic friends, and they wanted to know more about living in wonder and all that. And we got on the topic of psychedelic drugs. And one of the Catholics is like, I don't understand what you mean when you say that these drugs can open up a portal. Isn't it just happening in your mind? She couldn't make the connection between the mind and reality. She still had this implicit Cartesian dualism there. And I said, look, you're a sacramental Christian. The matter and spirit interpenetrate in mysterious ways. And so, of course, it could be the case that a chemical can affect your brain to make your brain perceive dimensions of reality that actually exist, but that you can't normally, access.
Yeah, and it's the same. I had someone tell me one day, she said, when I was a child, I saw a demon in my room. And she said, I don't know if it was in my mind or if it was really there. I don't know if it was just my imagination. And my answer to her was, well, did you see a bird, a cat, or did you see a demon? And she's like, I saw a demon. Well, you saw a demon. I mean, you know what a demon looks like, and you saw a demon. I don't know to what extent, the relationship between your inner experience and what is happening outside. If you see a demon, that means you are in a dangerous situation and you have to deal with it no matter what, no matter how you try to explain it mechanically. You don't have to think about that too much. I don't see demons, because I don't know. But if I did, then I would definitely go see a priest, and I wouldn't ask myself, well, is it just my imagination? Is it like really there? Where is it? Like, is it in another dimension? Like some kind of physical explanation. These things are important.
Well, people are having these experiences and trying to figure out what they are, when in fact the church has so many resources to help them. But like the story I lead Living in Wonder with, the story about the young man Nino, a Catholic lawyer who had these entities visiting him. Now, he had seen a UFO when he was 17 years old, back in 2009, out in the countryside where he lived, and just looked at it hovering over a field and just said, I don't know what that is. I'm just not going to tell anybody. They'll think I'm crazy. 7 years later, he's sitting in his apartment in the city where he was living for law school, studying for law school, and these two entities shimmered, that's the word he used, sort of shimmered into being through a portal that opened in his wall. And they began communicating with him telepathically. Nothing significant, things like a car is about to backfire on the street. Then that happened. They were just sort of establishing their bona fides with him, and then they went away. He thought he was losing his mind, went to the hospital, demanded tests. He was fine. Then they kept coming back. And the reason he reached out to me about this was this had been happening for years, and he had been too afraid to tell even his priest because he thought that the priest would think he was crazy. And when he got married, his wife saw them too, so he knew it wasn't in his head. And I said to him, well, did you think that these might be demons. You're a Catholic. Well, no. I said, well, why not? Did you ever pray when they were around you? Yeah. What happened? They would go away. Demons, right? He said, well, I thought demons would want to fight me. I said, no. There are stories exorcists tell about the people who've had UFO experiences. These things are almost certainly demons. So he went to his, on my advice, he went to the archdiocesan exorcist. He said, yeah, we've had these cases. Prayed over him. Things have not come back. I saw him not long ago when I was in the U.S. last time. It was a year after our initial conversation. He said, they haven't bothered me at all. Now, what I find interesting about that, Jonathan, is this man was not a skeptic. He was not unchurched. He was a practicing conservative Catholic. And yet, because he didn't have any background in demonology, and because these things chose to present themselves as somehow connected to the UFO, he didn't know what to do. And he was too afraid to go to the priest. And I have to believe that this is happening a lot now, and it's going to happen more and more.